in, I just want to give your company a little bit of a little bit of bragging, because I'll do that for you, because Citi has been a first mover in a lot of things. And I think being on the outside looking in, it's very cool. You're a top ranked employer, right? You've been leading with what's right. You put people before profits in a lot of cases, which is not what everyone does. Again, that's why you're first movers. You guys have recognized and continue to support the Equality Act of 2019 publicly. You were also early in recognizing same-sex partners and employees as dependents and beneficiaries, which is super important and very cool. I would also say there's a lot more that I can talk about, but around gender equality, Jane Fraser, first CEO, female CEO of the 4 major banks, right? Carla Hassan, CMO, and for me, in reflection, she's a Lebanese immigrant just like myself, or our parents are. So I've got the flag on today for her. I don't know if you can see it or not. There you go.
There it is.
You, Nikki, right? So I want to just jump in the agenda for the folks out there. We'll do the intro to Nikki. We'll talk about her internal mission, her external mission. Once they get the internal stuff in play, we'll do a little speed round. And then we'll if we have time, hopefully we'll get questions. So I'll stop talking, Nikki. Let's just talk about what you do, define your role, and how long you've been doing this in the industry.
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I lead, call myself a brand marketer, but we have not branded my team with a good name yet. So instead, we just talk about the 3 things that we do. So I lead 3 teams within Citi, within the global marketing organization. One focuses on internal brand engagement. So how do we bring the brand to life for our colleagues? The second focuses on global integration. That's really about how do we ensure that as a company that has boots on the ground, offices operating in 96 countries around the globe, that we are leveraging what we're all doing to grow the brand, to extend our marketing, to speak with one voice as much as we can. That is a challenge, I'm not gonna lie. That's the part of my job that I say I fail at every day, but we're getting better every day. And then the third component is I lead DE&I strategy for the brand. And so that really combines all the other things. And it's both an internal and external lens, whether we're working with HR on things for our people, if we're talking about how do we grow our employer brand, if we are talking about our products and services and how we bring them to life for consumers and clients around the world. It's all of those things. And so I feel excited to be able to have the opportunity to work across the globe, across business units, whether we're talking about consumers or corporate clients, really to bring each of these things to life. I've been doing this for my entire career, which is, I'll just say it's over 25 years, rather than putting an exact date on it.
You have experience, you've got a lot of experience.
I've been around the block. I have to say the most kind but also humbling call that I've had recently was with one of our Gen Z colleagues who set up time with me. She said, because you're on the fast track, so I wanted to just understand how you're moving up so quickly. And then I started taking her through my background, and she was like, wait, this math isn't adding up. I was like, yeah, I'm not who you think I am. I've been around the block.
It's never an overnight success. There's always of sweat equity into that overnight achievement. So
absolutely.
I think you're doing a lot of great stuff. It's
Definitely in the water right now. My question is, when was this role created? And really, what was the moment that was the aha, like we got to start doing this?
Yeah, I don't know if it was an aha. I think there was, well, I guess there was. So I've been doing a lot of the work that I do now for probably the past 3 years, but it formally became my job last November. And that was spurred by a few things. One, we went through a reorg internally as to how our marketing organization was structured at that time. And so I went from primarily having a purview around our consumer business to being across the entire enterprise. So going from a focus on 19 countries, to give a little bit of color to that, to the 96 that I talked about, to just thinking about consumers, to now also thinking about our corporate and institutional clients. So that happened in November as part of sort of the restructuring of putting our arms around this. But when I think about the things, particularly around the DE&I brand strategy piece, right? Because the other two were jobs that existed. Some of it I did, some of it other people did, and we sort of, reconstructed it. But the DE&I piece, really, while the work started before this, I would say the murder of George Floyd really said that this can't be someone's side job. This can't be the work that I was doing because I saw a need to do it. And so leaning in like this, we need to commit a team to doing this work. It's not a piece of something, it is the work itself. And so that I would say was really what sort of spurred us to really formalize it.
That kind of jumps into my next question before we go into internally. When we were younger, we would run into a store, we would just grab stuff off the shelf and we'd pay for it and leave. And now that product has to be good, obviously, but it has to also stand for something, right? People are checking the ingredients of what are you doing with your supply chain?
How's this affecting society? So I was asking, what came first, like a chicken or the egg? Consumer demand for purpose, or or like a moment like a George Floyd where you guys are like, we can't wait, we got to go?
I actually think they happen simultaneously, because I will say that there are a lot of organizations that have been doing the work for quite some time, but they've been doing it quietly. And I think, because of this concern that, maybe all of our stakeholders won't be comfortable with this work. And so it's been happening quietly. It's been happening as part of things like community reinvestment, or it's been happening only during Heritage Months, this conversation, only during Pride Month, but it's been happening in pockets all along. And I think what 2020 really did for us was to say, as well as the last few years, as consumers have said, we expect corporate leaders to stand for something. We expect brands to use their voice, use their platform. That's been happening across the past few years. It went off the charts in 2020. And so what I think it did was it gave us permission to be loud about it, to really bring it to the forefront, and not just permission, but it goes from being something that is expected, that consumers expect of us, to things that they demand of us, right? You have to have a voice. I need to know where you stand on certain issues. So it's no longer, maybe we'll do something here or there, maybe we'll remain silent. No, consumers demand to understand where you stand on issues.
That kind of goes back to the question we were talking about on my car ride home and where you are, how do you balance? Because we are in such a divided world, right? How do you balance purpose with maximizing your customer base?
Yeah.
You're doing the right thing, but are people getting upset about it and pushing back also?
Yeah, I tend to believe, and this is going to sound a little Pollyanna, but the data sort of proves it out. I think we are less divided than we think we are. I think, when we raise things up to sort of political platform levels, people sort of go to their corners, right? And they get ready to fight. But in real life, regardless of what side of the political aisle you stand on, regardless of whether you consider yourself a liberal or a conservative, people across any kind of diversity spectrum, right? You interact with them. You may not think of them as a political position, you think of them as a human, as a friend, a coworker, a colleague, another parent, a soccer parent, or whatever the case may be. You have these people in your life. And so I think throughout regular life, we are less divided than sort of how maybe some loud voices want to articulate those things. And when I say the data shows it out, and I know we're going to talk about some of the work that we've done with the trans community, 60% of people across the globe believe that their country should be doing more to support trans people. That's a statistic that shocked me, right?
It's a majority.
It's the majority. And it's the majority of Americans as well. 62% of Americans, I might get the stat wrong, sort of believe that trans people should have, the same rights as everyone else. And that is a huge jump from what the same group of people believed 5 years ago. self-reported, right? And so I do think we're less divided than what we think we are. And if we can just sort of think about these things on a human one-to-one level, I think that's where we'll realize that we're less different than we think.
Yeah. Look, and credit is due to the work you've all been doing. GSK before us, you know, what Citi's doing, what P&G is doing, what publishers are doing, reflecting audiences. Like, it's now like in the cake, right? It's going to get better and better percentage-wise. So I think moving on to internally now, like getting everyone involved, I think, you know, I say you're not only marketing to the LGBT community, you're creating products and services driven by empathy, right? That provide self-confidence and meet their needs as a customer. So I guess my question is, you know, walk us through how a 200-year-old bank comes to the conclusion of this, right? You guys are an old school banking service and you're leading the way in trans and non-binary efforts.
Yeah. So first I'm going to give the non-sexy, just super pragmatic reason that Jerry actually alluded to or spoke directly about, right? And how Gen Z identifies. They don't identify the way the rest of us do. And so it would behoove any company, any brand to really lean into supporting the LGBTQIA+ community, other diverse communities, because that is future-proofing your business. Regardless of how your current consumers identify, those of us of a certain age who may or may not outwardly identify as anything, may or may not accept even within ourselves who we may or may not be, younger consumers do, and they lean into it, or they reject it altogether and say, I don't need to check a box, right? And if we don't understand that and try to learn that and get our arms around it and embrace it and start designing for it and start speaking to it directly, then I think many of us are going to find ourselves sort of late to the game and losing consumers over time. So very pragmatically, it's future-proofing your business, right? And so sharing that data to very conservative group of bankers at a 200-plus-year-old bank is where you start. This is what the consumer base looks like. Oh, and by the way, when we start talking about this particular initiative around trans people or LGBTQIA+ community, or Black people or Black women, or whatever it is that you're focusing on, to understand the challenges of that audience and sort of where can Citi play a role to solve those challenges? Where are we interacting with that audience that we can be a help and not a hindrance? And so for us, it was understanding that 70% of trans and non-binary people go by a name other than their legal name. And every time, well, actually, another stat is that just about 70%, so it's actually 68%, so a slightly lower percentage, don't have any ID, credit card, anything with the name with which they identify. And a third of those folks experience some kind of negative interaction when they try to use their ID, credit card, whatever it may be, that displays their legal name or their dead name, right? And so these are all interaction points that they're having with us. And they are getting re-traumatized as we dead name them every time they interact with us. Every time they physically use our product, we are reminding them that we don't think they're who they say they are. And so the question is, where are those friction points and how can we remove them? How can we?
That's amazing. You think about that. Every product wants to make people's lives better. You basically said, like, every time someone uses a product that doesn't represent them,
It's a reverse effect.
That's right.
And that's
right.
Happiness and diversity now equal revenue to people making those decisions. And those facts have led you to, you know, what you have done with the new feature. But right before we get into that, you know, you get this, we get this. How do you bring in the employee population? How do you get people wrapped around this?
Yeah.
Training, approval process, all of it.
Yeah. So first, it was selling it into the senior execs. So exactly that process of what I just described, helping them to understand sort of what this customer experience looks like for those folks. And that's how we sort of sold in, yes, we need to do this, right? And then from there, as we started designing, we brought in people into the process who could help us with that, people who have gone through this experience, trans and non-binary people who know what it's like on the other end of that. And we also brought their stories to life internally. We conducted 2 different sets of training that we call empathy training. One was for over 5,000 customer service agents, so that they understand what the calls from this community are going to look like. Exactly what I just said. You know, someone has a fraudulent charge on their call, on their card, and then they're calling into us, and we then, you know, they have to essentially come out again just to be able to handle this transaction or whatever the case may be, like helping our agents, our customer service agents who are interacting with them understand what that's like. And listen, there are places where we still need to refer to a customer as their legal name, but we have both names available on the account so that we can pivot and let them know, no, I see who you are, but you know, for whatever reason, fraud or whatever else it is, I might need to refer to this name, and then we're gonna move on. Because I see you, right? And so the customer service agents really understanding what that's like was the next piece. And then the third piece was about everybody else within the company. This is not just for the front line. If I am designing digital tools for our customers, I also need to understand what that's like. So we brought in other brands to talk about the work that they're doing in the space. We brought in trans people, trans activists to talk about things like what it's like to be re-traumatized, and frankly, had very tough conversations about what they expect from us and where we can do better, right? It's like, this is great. Now let me tell you where else you can go.
Right.
And then we also spoke with colleagues in a very public way, you know, on a panel like this, because all this happened, unfortunately, during COVID. But spoke with colleagues to say, okay, what does this look like to you as an ally, as someone completely outside of the community, as a trans person, as a non-binary person, and again, learned even more about what we can do differently for each of those audiences. And so we did all of this for all of our colleagues. And the great thing that we heard from colleagues in particular, I'll never forget the day we launched, and having, you know, lots of success from a media impressions perspective, lots of feedback. I was up late, you know, putting together recap notes for the leadership team so that they knew how things were going. And I received an IM from a colleague in Hong Kong. Now, we launched this in the US.
Right.
And I received this IM from a colleague in Hong Kong who said, you know, today when we came into the office, we read about the launch, and I immediately received outreach from a trans colleague who works in the back office who has never felt seen before. And this told that person that they are seen by Citi.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, and this is across the globe, this thing.
Literally the other side of the world. This product hasn't even been rolled out there yet. And yet this was the reaction. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's great. That's a great kind of
Test of where you are. Obviously, it's the right direction. So that's internal, right? Which we all know. A lot of people talk the talk. You guys definitely walk the walk. And I think the credit card offering, True Name, is just a great example. And that's why we're here. I mean, that was a great setup. It's a ton of work, but output now matters. Walking the walk, all about. I think I love to talk about the new feature for everyone that we can't see, but we know they're out there.
Yeah.
So cover up the new feature is.
So, you know, whenever I talk about it, I think this seems really simple, and it does in hindsight. Like, of course you should be able to do this. It is simply on your Citi branded credit card. So the card you already have with us as a customer, whatever card it is, it's not a special card, whatever Citi branded credit card you have with us, you now have the ability to update your first name on that card so that it reflects your chosen name with which you identify, even if that name is different than your legal name. It's that simple. That is what you can do on your plastic. But the key thing and a big learning that we have is that we also enable that on your account. What does that mean? That means that when you come to us, via digital, via mobile app. When you call our call center, you will be addressed using that name. So again, you're not coming out again. You're not being re-traumatized. We are recognizing you through that name with which you identify across touch points. And when I say that was a big learning for us, it was something that we enabled. We actually enabled that first because that was something that we could very easily get buy-in on. So that's actually where we started before we even enabled the plastic, right? So just because it was the lowest hanging fruit. But what we've seen from a results perspective, we've issued over 11,000 new cards with updated names, but we've updated over 240,000 accounts where people didn't even ask for new plastic. Nope, I just want you to call me by my name when I interact with you. That's it. I don't need a new plastic. I just want you to call me by my name. And so that might have been a trademark infringement thinking about the movie. Didn't mean to do that, but
240,000 people, we talked about this, that's critical mass in this arena. And by the way, it just goes to show that there's demand.
Yeah.
Feeling yourself.
And I think, just in full transparency, all of those people aren't trans people, right? They're not all trans people. They are also people like me. My first name is not Nikki. My first name is one that, all my life people have had problems pronouncing. I've never gone by it. Nowhere do I go and people call me by my legal first name. Everyone knows me. My mother calls me Nikki. And so, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to see my name that I go by on my credit card. Now, that's not the same as a trans person, but it does give a sense of belonging. I see you, right? That still is what that message is saying. And so I don't know that 240,000 people are trans people, right. But it's certainly people who want to be seen.
And by the way, it seems crazy to think that this is not the case everywhere, but obviously it's not, because my next question is about how is this embraced by counterparts in the industry, other banks, right? Because you guys, what's cool about this is you don't want to hoard this to yourself. You see this go wider, and how's that going?
Yeah, so we were the first major issuer to do this with MasterCard. But there was a smaller bank, a small regional Canadian bank that did it first. And MasterCard has done a great job of trying to roll this out across the globe, and they've expanded to several European banks. But in the US, we are still the only major bank to have launched this functionality. And frankly, exactly to your point, we love being the first. I'm extremely proud of being the first major issuer to do this, but we don't want to be the only, we don't want to be the last. And so we thought that, we'd see lots of fast follows with this. Maybe not so fast, because it is a little harder to do than one might think. But the biggest piece is sort of getting over yourself, right? and accepting that, you've got the technology to provide a secure experience for your customers and allow them to use a different first name on their account and their card. And so, my hope is that as we continue to talk about the success that we've had, we continue to refine this and expand it, that we will see others follow suit.
Do you think, I was going to play the video of the commercial spot, one of them that I loved, but this is going too fast. We need like another hour. But do you think sharing statistics and success metrics broadly would make people follow even faster? I don't know if we're going to share though. I feel like let's play the clip. Let's play the tape. It's a great commercial, and we'll come back after and talk about how you get it out. Let's hit play. Thank you. Put the volume on.
Or Alex. Austin's nice. Yeah.
Okay. Hear me out. Langston. All right.
I was thinking about Gregory.
Who?
Gregory.
Gregory. James? Hey, Ma. Yep, still narrowing it down. Robert. My grandpa? I kind of like Justin.
This was for you. Nice to meet you, Justin.
If you are transgender or non-binary and go by a different first name, let's update your eligible Citi credit card.
All right, thank you. Nikki, I thought for me, the big moment was the card, the tangible piece that it's almost like the moment, right? That you're there. And I was like, we got to share this because that's what it's all about, that moment.
Thank you. So that work, I will say, one, I'm extremely proud of that work. But that work is a result of really a community coming together to try to do the absolute right thing and ensure that we are leaning in to all the things that I think we need to lean into. So for example, we feature a trans man. So only, I think it's 0.3% of advertising features trans people, period. And very rarely is it a trans man. Trans men are very underrepresented in media. And so we thought it was critically important to feature a trans man in that spot. The second piece that we really thought was important, in addition to having diversity, and you can see it's intersectional, it's a trans man of color, but in addition to having that diversity in front of the camera, was to have that behind the camera. So we worked with a director and cinematographer who went to film school together. And the director is cisgender, but the cinematographer is transgender, and they've been friends since pre-transition. And so they have seen each other throughout that trans process, that transition. And the beautiful thing about it, because I think the film is just so loving in how we're viewing the relationship. And I think that is because we are literally viewing this through the lens of a trans person. And I just think that that's just beautiful that we've been able to bring that to life. And, you know, quite frankly, I don't know that the spot would have been nearly as successful had we tried to just do it with our team that we normally work with. It was critically important, production, creative, on the client side with my team, that we bring trans voices into this conversation and that we ensure that they were with us along the way. So working with Publicis Group, with Publicis New York in particular, they leaned in to their Egalite ERG, so that they brought trans people from day one as we started going through this work, that they were at the table and guiding this work. And so that was critically important. And we had trans people on the Citi side that needed to sign off on every step of the work as well, because what we didn't want to do is have all this effort that we were putting into developing this, all this investment that we were making into both the product and the marketing, to be undermined by getting the message wrong. And I think that's critically important, right? That we include people to ensure that the care and authenticity and frankly, the credibility, right? That you're building on something, it's not just fluff and you can deliver on it, that's all coming through.
Yeah, first of all, even the piece where he's talking to his mom or dad is amazing. And then they're bringing in the grandpa, like they're bringing in lineage. It's like, I mean, that could be anybody.
Yeah, as a brand marketer, you know, as someone who has an intersectional existence myself, one of the things that my team and I remember it was a Saturday and we were like, we got to get together and talk about this, were the names. Right. So the list of names.
The brainstorm session.
Yeah, that he was going through, because we had these names that, you know, as a Black person, frankly, I was like, he wouldn't be considering this name.
Right.
Like, that's not the name that he would be considering. That wouldn't be his grandfather's name, right? So we sort of went through, let's make sure that all of this feels real, that all of this feels authentic, right? To all of his experiences, all of his identities, and not just one, right?
So that's a great point to everyone out there who, again, we don't see, but we know they're there and you're learning from Nikki, you know, and also from ViacomCBS, you know, Jerry, the last call talked about RuPaul and Queer as Folk. That's us, right?
That's right.
You got to get that right, or else you're stereotyping and then you're done. So all that work you guys did internally to get this out, you know, is in jeopardy if you miss the mark.
That's exactly right.
Well, did the same thing within the Heights. I mean, who's better than him for his community? And he still missed the mark and he still had to apologize.
Yeah.
So really pay attention out there and bring in the right people, because it's going to work and you're going to support their livelihood, right?
Yeah.
They still have to make a living. I think that goes into the next piece. You know, now that you've, you know, talent and production and staff and writing, you know, when it's time to get the word out on platforms, when it's time to put your message in the path now, people, how important is the supply chain in their efforts in responsible investing in their product? Like, how important is the supply chain's efforts in support?
Yeah. So I think, you know, just very basically, if it's really hard to speak to an audience when that audience is not involved, whether you're talking about on the creative side, on the media side, like wherever it is critical that the people who are going to be receiving the message have some hand in the message. And I share with you, my team sort of goes by a motto: there can be nothing about us without us, regardless of who the us is. And we didn't coin that. One of those activists who came in actually to speak to us said that, and we were like, this is it. And this is how we're operating going forward. So if I'm doing work with any community, then I want to ensure that my agency team is diverse, and or that I'm working with a diverse agency, right? And so that authenticity comes through. And if I am thinking about where am I going to place this, that I'm leveraging tools, some of the tools that we leverage are with the ANA, their GEM score and their SIM score that looks at gender and then other cultural inclusion, right? Around the media placement, so that I understand how different programming speaks to this audience and whether they are supporting or supportive of what we are trying to convey. And that goes into that. The other piece, which is a little bit off topic, but I just want to point out from a media perspective, is that when we launched this back in October, actually in November, we actually did our big creative push. We did out of home with this, and we did out of home throughout New York on like Citi bike kiosks, because of course we have Citi bike. We've got out of home literally around the city, as well as major placements in LA. Because what we also realized is that, to my earlier point about the limited exposure of trans people in media, that it was critically important that people see these images as they go through their daily lives, because trans people are there as we go through our daily lives.
Normalize it, because it is.
That's right. And so it was really important for this not to just be the commercial or just be our social media or whatever it is, other digital placements, but that physically in real life, you're seeing these images and you're thinking about trans and non-binary people in your day-to-day going.
And that goes back to support. Don't just support in Pride Month, right? That should be
right.
That's what you celebrate, but you're working on it all year.
You work on it all year. We're working on expanding now. Like we're working on, it is a year-long thing. Last week I had a million meetings about this, and that's post-Pride, right? Like, it's not like, okay, let's gear up. It's okay, what's next? And what does this long-term plan look like? And listen, I would say that about this. I also say that about other communities that we are working to support and design programs around, whether it be product offering or marketing, we're trying to take the double bottom line approach, right? Where you have, to do well, you need to do good. And so tying in the social impact, the purpose into what we do, and that's how we're going to drive our bottom line. So it's not
stand out. That's how you can also stand out, because sameness is becoming an issue in the marketplace. So what makes you better and different?
And what your team is doing is that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's not an extra thing. This is how we are doing business going forward.
I think this is why we're all here, by the way. It's great to have a full day on this. And I think we only have a few minutes. I have another page of questions that I need to skip. Some of it's around social media, because we talked about Gen Z, right? But beyond the 15s, 30s, this minute spot, there's so many restrictions for banks to really engage in that conversation. And I really want to get into how you navigate that to support and engage on those platforms. But again, we only have 4 minutes left. I'd like to take a question from the crowd.
Sure.
And I want to give a shout out. You mentioned Publicis. One of my speed round questions was true or false. 7 Publicis agencies received the accolade of best places to work for LGBTQ equality this year. Is it true or false that 7 of their agencies received that award?
I don't know, but I'm going to say true.
I'm going to say false. I'm
number.
saying false. It's false, because they didn't do 7, they did 10 agencies.
Wow.
Been better.
That's awesome.
So let me get in. I see a question in here. It's a long one. All right. How important is having a mainstream media campaign for LGBTQ plus inclusive advertising? So how important is it to have a campaign? For example, the True Name spot aired during today's show, which has a bigger impact than if the spot just aired on a website. So how important is running a spot really in mass media?
Yeah. So I think I want to talk about the Today Show in particular, right? So the Today Show, when you talk about normalizing, right, which you mentioned earlier, that's exactly what running something on the Today Show is. And we've actually done a few engagements with the Today Show around this work, because, that really says, to your point, like, this is life. This is normal. These are our friends. These are certainly our kids. And so changing culture happens through advertising, content, entertainment. That's how we do it. And so while it is important, critically important, to speak directly to the audiences that you're going to be impacting, it can't just be those audiences.
That's right.
If we're trying to change culture.
That's
we
right.
also have to speak to the general market to ensure that they see the change, they understand the change, and they can begin to engage with it as well.
Yeah, that train's left the station. I mean, with my kids, with the generation coming up, with millennials, Gen Z, our ViacomCBS North Star, we know that this is the way to go.
That's right.
Which is really exciting. And here we are on that note, Nikki. We did it to the T. Andrew, how was that okay for you?
I mean, I have just been. I wish I had a basket to collect all the knowledge fruit you guys just dropped, because this has been one of my most inspiring sessions of the day, in a day that's been nonstop inspiring, of course, but yes.
Well, thank you both.
Goes to Nikki. I just asked the questions. She's done this for many years. Have Citibank turn 300. So let's keep moving.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Well, Pete, I mentioned it in my question as well, though. I mean, your company has played a huge role in advancing equality as well, not the least of which is properties like RuPaul's Drag Race, which are home to a lot of the most inclusive, mainstream across the board work we've seen as well. So you guys play an equally.
Couldn't be more proud. I could not be more proud of where I work. I feel like I'm every day representing the cause. I need you to buy our stuff so we can continue to fuel it, right?
Right, that's right.
We have to reflect the culture in order for this to move.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, before I let you go, I am curious, what is next from those, you said, dozens of meetings you guys have had? What's next for True Name in particular?
I don't think my PR team will allow me to say. So generically, I will say that we are working to expand availability of the feature beyond the business where we have it today. That's probably as much as I can say.
That's fantastic to hear.
I will also say, actually, and we are working to improve the experience, continually improve the experience of our current customers as well.
That's right. Well, and those early adoption statistics you shared earlier were really encouraging to see how already your customer base has embraced it. Well, excellent. Well, Nikki, Pete, thank you both so much. With that, we are at the last session of the day. So thank you to all of you who've tuned in now or been with us through all or part of the day. But thanks again to Nikki and Pete. And
Great job.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
guys. All right. So last but not least, I'm so thrilled to welcome to our virtual stage